The afternoon sun pressed down on Amarillo, Texas, its heat shimmering off the chrome of parked trucks outside Lone Star Funeral Home. At 2:30 p.m., Staff Sergeant Luna Rodriguez stood rigidly by the entrance, Army class a uniform crisp against the dusty breeze. The Army Commendation Medal and Combat Action badge gleamed on her chest, catching light that seemed out of place. In one hand, she held her Kevlar helmet, unwilling to wear it here. Around her neck, the silver St. Christopher pendant swung faintly with each gust, brushing her collarbone as if reminding her why she still stood tall. Inside the chapel, muffled hymns drifted through the doorway, yet Luna remained on the concrete steps. The smell of lilies carried from inside, mixing with diesel fumes rolling from the parking lot where idling trucks hissed, their air brakes expelling weary breaths. She tightened her grip on the helmet, steady but trembling, knowing every pair of eyes inside had already chosen their verdict. Then came her mother's voice, shrill, cutting through prayer like a whip. She killed her father with that speed demon obsession. Take that uniform off before you shame us further. Miguel, her brother, stepped forward from the line of mourners. His glare bore the weight of years, his finger pointed like an accusation carved from stone. Dad died in a truck because of you. You made him think racing down highways was noble. He pushed himself until it broke him. This is your fault. Luna did not answer. Her jaw clenched, posture locked, a soldier in formation enduring fire without cover. Only her hands betrayed her, a slight tremor against the polished helmet. The auctioneer's booming voice carried over the tension, standing near a fold-out podium inside the hall. Ladies and gentlemen, the Rodriguez family logistics fleet, 53 trucks, will be available for immediate bidding following the service. His words fell like nails hammered into wood, announcing the death of legacy alongside the death of blood. Guests whispered, some turning away in embarrassment, others savoring the spectacle of a once proud family crumbling publicly. To many, Luna's presence in uniform was not a badge of honor but the last insult to a collapsing empire. Back row, Miguel barked when she tried to step toward the coffin. You don't get to stand with us. You don't belong near him. They guided her toward the last pew, a soldier reduced to an outcast in the very place she had once called home. As the procession moved, she walked steadily, though each step resounded in her chest like a drum of shame. She sat where she was told, alone, her medal shining faintly in the dim light, more a target than a triumph. She raised her eyes toward the coffin. For a moment, she tried to remember the last words her father had spoken directly to her, something more than silence. But the shouts drowned memory, the venom of her mother's curse, the auctioneer's announcement, and Miguel's decree formed a chorus against her existence. Inside, her thoughts lined up like soldiers awaiting orders. They want me to vanish. They want me to dissolve into nothing. But a soldier does not abandon the mission. A soldier holds the line. The lily's sweet rot pressed against her nostrils, so different from the sharp sting of burning fuel she had known on convoy routes. Her ears clung to the air brake's sigh, that familiar release that once meant survival on roads where death lurked behind every curve. Here, in this hall filled with condemnation, the same sound mocked her, life reduced to liquidation, skill reduced to reckless sin. She tapped the St. Christopher pendant twice, a habit born long ago, an unconscious rhythm to steady her nerves. The pendant swung again, catching glimmers of light as if signaling back. You are not erased yet. As the priest began his sermon, voices of prayer rose, but none softened the chill pressing against her back. Every whispered word from family members sitting rows ahead was a reminder that to them she was not a daughter, not a sister, not even a mourner. She was the shadow blamed for collapse. She inhaled sharply, forcing herself upright, refusing to let her body betray the storm inside. She would not cry here, not before them. And yet, as the coffin's lid caught the final rays of sun, her father's absence weighed heavier than the uniform on her shoulders. The man who once taught her the hum of engines, who whispered that she had wheels in her blood, was gone, and the only legacy left for her was blame. Even as the words of condemnation echoed, even as the company dissolved into auction, Luna's mind traced backward, not to shame, but to memory. To dawn hours when the world was quiet, when a father's pride shone in secret lessons, to the moment he had first placed her hands on a steering wheel and said, "Don't let anyone kill that." The funeral hymns blurred. The lily's perfume suffocated. The trucks outside hissed as though restless. And Luna's memory, unbidden, pulled her away from the humiliation of this day and back into the one truth she had always carried. The road had claimed her long before this family ever disowned her. She closed her eyes, held the pendant, and let the funeral fade into silence. The road that had defined her had begun long ago, in mornings when she was only a child with hands too small for a wheel, and yet already certain she was meant to drive. And so the memory returned, carrying her away from the suffocating chapel, to the days when her father first taught her the art of speed and steel. It was the beginning of everything, the wheels in her blood. The memory carried Luna back to a time before uniforms, before medals, before shame. She was 8 years old when the roads first whispered to her, when the hum of engines became the language she understood better than any scolding voice. In the compound behind the family's modest home in Amarillo, her father would shake her awake before dawn. The sky still carried its bruised purple hue as he placed the keys of an 18-wheeler into her small hands. "Come on, Mija," Earl Rodriguez would say, his voice firm but warm. "The world's asleep. It's just you, me, and the road." At first, her legs barely reached the pedals. The seat swallowed her, leather cracked and smelling of oil and diesel. But within 2 weeks, Luna was shifting gears as though she had been born doing it. She could back the truck into a narrow slot without scraping metal, take a wide turn with the right lean of the wheel, downshift through a curve smoother than drivers 3 times her age. One morning, after she parked perfectly against the dock, Earl leaned in close, his breath carrying the faint scent of coffee and fuel. "You've got wheels in your blood, Mija. Don't let anyone kill that." The words etched themselves deep, a secret medal long before the army ever pinned one to her chest. But secrets breed jealousy. Her cousins watched with narrowed eyes as Earl lavished his time on her. They stumbled for months, while Luna moved like she was born with the truck fused to her veins. Whispered barbs followed her. "Show off. Dangerous. Trying to be one of the boys." The resentment boiled over when Luna was 10. A delivery needed to be made, and Earl, pressed for time, allowed her to sit behind the wheel as they headed east on I-40. The hum of tires was steady until she made the decision that nearly sealed her fate. The lane ahead was clogged, a slow-moving car choking the flow. Luna eased into the left lane, foot pressing on the accelerator, the speedometer climbing. For a few glorious seconds, she felt the roar of command. Then the school bus appeared, yellow and sudden, bearing down head-on. Earl's shout rattled the cab. Luna yanked the wheel back, the truck lurched violently, horns blaring. Tires screeched, the trailer swayed, but somehow they avoided catastrophe. When the dust settled, silence filled the cab. Earl's hands gripped the dashboard, eyes full of conflict, fear, pride, something unspeakable. But when they returned home, he said nothing. He let the family tell the story instead. "She nearly killed a busload of kids," one cousin hissed. "She's reckless, dangerous," Miguel declared. Maria only shook her head. "This is what happens when you let a girl play with machines meant for men." The verdict was swift. A single mistake, one near miss, and Luna's reputation was branded forever. Reckless, unsafe, a liability. What hurt most was her father's silence. He did not defend her. He let their words stand, not because he believed them, but because he wanted peace. And so the family's story became truth, Luna was too dangerous to be trusted. That night, she sat on her bed, clutching the St. Christopher pendant her father had given her. "Patron saint of travelers," he had whispered. "This will keep you safe on every road." Now she tapped it twice against her chest, though her mind churned. If I'm so good, she thought, why does everyone want me to stop? She was the fastest learner, yet she carried the heaviest punishment. Her cousins wrecked gears, dented bumpers, but they were forgiven. Boys were allowed mistakes. She was not. The resentment became her shadow. She ate alone, words of warning following her like chains. Yet the memory of her father's whispered praise, "Wheels in your blood," kept her alive inside, even when the silence cut deeper than the insults. Luna learned to bury her talent, to swallow her pride. But the hunger remained. Each time she passed the trucks lined in the lot, she felt the pull. It wasn't adrenaline she craved, nor danger. It was belonging. Behind the wheel, the world made sense, and for a few fleeting hours, she wasn't reckless. She was right. By 12, she could strip a transmission, rewire a brake light, or balance a trailer load with precision. Yet with each skill mastered, the family's distrust deepened. The better she became, the stronger their suspicion grew. Sometimes she caught her father watching her, pride flickering in his eyes. But when others entered the room, the pride vanished into silence, leaving her stranded between truth and fiction. The contradictions defined her childhood: a father's secret admiration, a mother's open disdain, siblings who saw her as both rival and curse. And through it all, the hum of engines marked the rhythm of her life, each mile a testimony that she was meant for more. She tapped the pendant again at night, listening to trucks rumble on distant highways. The rhythm reminded her of who she was, even as the world tried to strip it away. She did not yet know that the very gift that set her apart would one day drive her to glory and to ruin. The funeral had reminded her of the cruelty of blame. But here, in memory, she found the seed of everything: talent twisted into burden, love hidden in silence, and the birth of a doubt that would haunt her forever. And as the memory sharpened, it carried her toward the storm that would define her, the road where a single decision would turn her from daughter to outcast, from savior to villain. The tornado road was waiting. The memories of childhood jealousy and whispered accusations bled into the one night that sealed Luna's place in the family as both savior and curse. She was 15, already taller, stronger, and sharper than most of the boys in her neighborhood. But none of that mattered when the sky over Amarillo turned the color of bruised steel, and the air carried that strange stillness before a storm. By evening, the weather sirens wailed. A Category 4 tornado was carving a path across the plains, bearing down toward town. Neighbors fled for cover. Luna's family huddled together, except for Maria, stranded at a grocery store. Miguel, supposed heir to the trucking legacy, refused to take the wheel of the Ford F-350. His hands shook, his face pale. "I can't," he muttered. "The roads are death out there." The silence that followed was suffocating. Earl's eyes flicked to Luna. He didn't say the words, but she understood. Without hesitation, she grabbed the keys. Outside, winds screamed, ripping signs and flinging trash like shrapnel. Luna pressed the gas, the pickup fighting her grip as gusts shoved it from side to side. She drove into the chaos, headlights slicing through flying debris, her jaw set. The sound of the storm was not unlike mortar fire she would one day know. At the grocery store, Maria stood frozen in terror as windows shattered. Luna pulled up, shouting, "Get in!" Her mother stumbled inside as hail battered the doors. Luna floored the accelerator, pushing the vehicle toward safety. For a moment, triumph surged. She had done it. She had rescued her mother. Then the brakes gave out. A jagged piece of debris had sliced through the line, and the truck barreled forward. Luna fought the wheel, downshifting, angling the truck as best she could, but the slick asphalt betrayed her. The vehicle tipped, metal groaning, before flipping hard onto its side. The world spun. Glass cut her skin, ozone and gasoline filled her lungs. Maria screamed, her arm caught, her head striking the dash. When the truck finally stopped skidding, the storm's howl drowned everything else. Luna crawled back inside to pull her mother free. Hours later in the hospital, Luna stood at Maria's bedside. Instead of gratitude, Maria's words cut deep. "This is why girls shouldn't drive. You nearly killed me." The verdict spread quickly. Cousins, uncles, even Miguel repeated it. Luna had been reckless again. First a school bus, now her mother. The family rule came down swift. Luna was banned from driving Rodriguez vehicles ever again. She sat alone that night, the storm still echoing in her ears. Her father entered her room after midnight, his face lined with exhaustion. He sat beside her bed, voice low. "You saved her life. 3 more minutes and that building would have been gone. She'd be dead without you." He squeezed her shoulder. "When you're 18, I'll teach you to drive like a professional. But until then, you have to keep quiet. I can't fight them all." The words were meant as comfort, but they settled like chains. He wanted her to hide her talent, to smother the thing that made her alive. His secret pride only deepened her guilt. She had risked her life, and instead of recognition, she carried blame, silence, and a promise she could never share. Alone again, she tapped the pendant against her chest, 3 times now, as though begging it to erase the guilt. Yet the rhythm offered no comfort. For the first time, she wondered if maybe the others were right. Maybe her gift was a curse. The contradiction tore at her. She had saved her mother, but she was branded a danger. She had acted with courage, but she was punished as reckless. She lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling, the storm still roaring in her memory. From that night on, she understood something brutal. Good intentions did not protect you from blame. Only flawless execution could. Perfection became her only shield. The scent of ozone, the scrape of metal, the echo of her mother's accusation, all became part of her. And though she was forbidden from touching the family's trucks, she knew the road still belonged to her. Years later, in a desert half a world away, she would feel that same storm inside her as she gripped the wheel of military convoys. But for now, at 15, she was just a girl lying in bed with a scent. Christopher pendant pressed to her chest, silently vowing that the next time she took the wheel, no one would dare call her reckless again. The tornado road had scarred her, but it had also carved the path forward. The next step would not be family roads, but wheels of war. The vow she made after the tornado never left her. By the time Luna turned 18, the walls of home had closed in around her like a cage. She was still banned from touching a family truck, still branded as reckless, still treated as a liability. Her cousins carried the Rodriguez name proudly on company haulers, but Luna was expected to disappear into silence. Instead, she chose escape. On a hot summer morning, Earl drove her to the recruitment office. Neither spoke much during the ride. His hand stayed clenched on the wheel, the lines of his face drawn tighter than usual. When they parked, he pulled the St. Christopher pendant from beneath his shirt. "This kept me alive in Vietnam," he said, voice gravelly. "Now it's your turn." He pressed it into her palm. For a second, the silence between them felt like forgiveness. Maria's reaction when she learned of Luna's enlistment was sharp and cold. Good, maybe the army will teach her discipline. Miguel didn't even look at her, muttering that the family would finally have peace. But Luna carried no bitterness that day, only relief. The army didn't know her reputation. The army would judge her by skill, not rumor. At Fort Leonard Wood, she stepped into a world where trucks were not just machines but instruments of survival. She chose MOS 88M, motor transport operator, and from the first day, her instructors knew she was different. Drill sergeants barked orders, but when Luna took the wheel of a 40-ton transport, her movements were precise, instinctive. "Rodriguez!" One shouted after she threaded a vehicle through a narrow course. "You drive like you were born behind the wheel." Her platoon noticed too. They gave her a nickname, Wheels. For the first time, the name felt like honor instead of insult. The army had no patience for family grudges, only performance, and performance was where Luna thrived. Convoy training hardened her. She learned to maneuver massive vehicles through desert conditions, to coordinate with gunners, to keep formation tight under threat. She mastered the art of steering through ambush scenarios, learning to downshift under fire to keep calm in chaos. Every mile was another step away from Amarillo. When deployment orders came, she was assigned to the 1st Cavalry Division. Iraq. Operation Iraqi Freedom. The highway between Baghdad and Mosul became her proving ground. Those roads were littered with burned-out husks of trucks that hadn't made it. They called it the Highway of Death. Convoys were ambushed daily by IEDs and small arms fire. Many drivers froze when the shooting started. Luna didn't. She drove like the storm still roared in her ears, but this time the storm was external, mortar blasts shaking the ground, tracer fire cutting the night sky. On her first mission, when a lead vehicle struck a roadside bomb and chaos rippled through the convoy, Luna's calm hands guided her truck through smoke, weaving around wreckage while keeping her formation tight. Soldiers who followed her found safety in her steadiness. After dozens of missions, word spread. If Wheels was leading, chances of making it home doubled. Soldiers trusted her, not out of rank but survival. She became more than a driver. She was the one who could get them through alive. She logged 47 missions without losing a single man. No casualties under her watch. Each successful return built her legend inside the unit. Her convoy became a family she had never known, one that judged her by competence and courage instead of bloodline. And with that came leadership. She was promoted quickly, her instincts turning into tactics, her calm into command. Her squad followed her without question. They knew the woman who drove like a storm could navigate them through hell itself. Yet even in triumph, Luna carried the weight of silence. Letters sent home went unanswered. News of her promotions never reached her family, or if it did, it was ignored. At medal ceremonies, she looked to the stands and saw only empty space where kin should have been. Still, she stood tall. For the first time, the name Rodriguez carried respect outside Amarillo. In the army, her skill wasn't seen as reckless. It was survival, precision, discipline. Her road had carried her far from the family who cursed her, into a war where her gift became salvation. But war does not forgive without cost. The smell of burning fuel seeped into her memory. The sound of diesel engines idling at dawn became the rhythm of her heartbeat. Every time the pendant tapped against her dog tags during a bumpy ride, she remembered the promise she had made as a girl, that no one would ever call her reckless again. The wheels of war had carried her away from Amarillo, but they were only beginning their turn. The road ahead would demand more miles, more courage, and more sacrifice than she had ever imagined. And with each mission, the legend of Wheels grew, leading her toward a crucible that would test her like no storm back home ever could. Next came Afghanistan, and 100,000 miles under fire. Afghanistan became the true crucible. If Iraq had forged her reputation, the mountain roads of Kandahar and Helmand would burn it into legend. At 23, Luna carried new stripes on her sleeve, staff sergeant, one of the youngest female convoy commanders in the brigade. Her name was spoken with respect, even awe, but in Afghanistan, respect meant little unless you could deliver. The Kabul-Kandahar highway was notorious. Every bend could hide an IED, every overpass a sniper's nest. Drivers called it the deadliest road on earth. For Luna, it was where she would measure herself not against family whispers, but against death itself. Her convoy logs stacked up quickly. 847 missions, 127,000 miles driven through hostile territory. 0 KIA under her command. To the soldiers who followed her, Wheels was not just a nickname anymore, it was a lifeline. They trusted her hands on the wheel more than armor on their trucks. The defining moment came during a mission they later called Operation Steel Rain. The convoy rolled out before dawn, 12 vehicles heavy with supplies critical for a forward base. At a choke point in Helmand province, the lead truck exploded in fire, an IED tearing the road apart. Mortars rained down, shaking the earth, and small arms fire erupted from the ridges. Most commanders would have ordered the men to dismount and fight it out. Luna chose differently. She assessed the terrain in seconds. The narrow mountain pass behind them was their only chance. She barked orders into the comms, then threw her truck into reverse. 18 Wheels screamed as she drove backward through the twisting road at 45 miles per hour. Behind her, 11 other trucks mirrored the maneuver, trusting her precision. Mortar blasts lit the night sky. Tracer rounds zipped past, but her focus was absolute. She reversed for nearly 2 miles, threading the convoy through the pass without a single vehicle lost. When they finally reached safety, the men tumbled out shaking, alive because she had refused to panic. The citation came weeks later, an Army Commendation Medal for exceptional leadership under fire. The words on the paper barely scratched the surface of what she had done. 34 soldiers had lived because she drove like no one else could. Her legend grew. Soldiers began to call her Lightning Wheels. New recruits whispered her name in the motor pool. Veterans slapped her on the back with gratitude. One mechanic said simply, "If Wheels is driving, you're already home." But behind the medals and applause lay the cost. Letters home went unanswered. Care packages never came. Her fiancé back in Texas ended the engagement with a single note. "You care more about those trucks than us." Even her promotion ceremony passed without a word from Amarillo. She stood at attention as the medal was pinned to her chest, scanning the crowd and finding only fellow soldiers where family should have been. The silence hollowed her victories. She drove flawless miles, saved lives again and again, yet could not bridge the gap across the ocean. Each time she tapped her pendant before a mission, she wondered if her father still followed her through military blogs, if he still believed in the words he had whispered long ago. "Wheels in your blood." Still, she never let the doubt show. In the motor pool before dawn, she checked every vehicle herself. Tires, fuel, transmissions. She demanded perfection because she had learned as a girl that only perfection shielded her from blame. And perfection was what kept her men alive. Some nights, when the engines cooled and silence fell across the base, Luna would lie awake, her body aching from tension. The faces of soldiers she had saved haunted her as much as the thought of those she might lose tomorrow. She carried the weight alone, refusing to admit to anyone that the burden was beginning to cut into her. By the end of her third tour, her record was unmatched. More than 100,000 miles under fire, 0 deaths in her command. Her name had become doctrine, her maneuvers taught as examples in training manuals. But she could not escape the loneliness pressing in from home, the knowledge that her triumphs on foreign soil meant nothing to her blood kin. The engines still roared in her ears even when she tried to sleep. The hiss of an air brake became her breathing rhythm. And when fear began to creep into her hands for the first time, when hesitation flickered in her gut, she pushed it down, telling herself what she had always known. A soldier does not abandon the mission. Yet Afghanistan would not let her go unscarred. The war gave her medals, but it also gave her silence, heartbreak, and the creeping doubt that maybe her gift carried danger after all. That doubt would break open the night she dialed home and heard her mother's voice again, not with pride, but with blame. The call that would shatter her came after Steel Rain, when she thought she had finally earned recognition. It was the voicemail that broke her. After Steel Rain, Luna believed she had finally carved out proof beyond argument. 100,000 miles, dozens of soldiers alive because of her hands, a medal gleaming on her chest. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to think Amarillo might hear of it, that maybe, finally, someone would say her name without bitterness. It was late on base when she decided to call home. The generators hummed outside her quarters, their steady drone mixing with the smell of JP-8 fuel that clung to her uniform. She tapped her fingernails against her helmet in the rhythm she had carried since childhood, 2 beats, then 3, to calm herself before dialing. When her mother's voice answered, it cut sharper than any IED. "You're playing soldier while your family is dying financially. Don't call here with your war stories." The line went dead before Luna could speak. She stared at the receiver, numb. Moments later it rang again, Miguel. His tone carried none of the brothers she remembered. The company lost 2/3 of its revenue, were months from bankruptcy. Dad kept overspending on new trucks, chasing your example. He thought we had to match your standards, and it killed us. Luna gripped the phone tighter. "Miguel." "No," he interrupted. "This is on you. If you want to be part of this family again, come home and help. If not, don't bother coming back." His voice cracked near the end, but he covered it with anger. The words struck harder than mortars. She had saved strangers in deserts and mountains, but here was her brother insisting her success had destroyed the only thing her father built. She lowered the phone slowly, as if it weighed as much as the truck she drove, and sat on the edge of her bunk staring into the shadows. Hours later, in the silence of the barracks, a voicemail arrived. She played it alone, light from a single bulb flickering overhead. Earl's voice came through, weak and strained. "Mija, I'm proud of you. Every mile you drive, I follow. I know about Steel Rain, about the medal. I should have defended you. You're not reckless, you're fearless. That's different." His breath rattled before the pause. "Don't come back for us. We're not worthy of what you've become." The message ended, leaving her in a storm more violent than Hellman's ambushes. Her father's secret pride, her mother's contempt, her brother's ultimatum, all colliding in her chest. For the first time, doubt crept into her hands. Driving had always been her sanctuary, the place where fear never touched her. But after that call, hesitation began to slip in. During missions, she found herself easing off the gas, trailing 15 miles slower than standard. A single convoy slowed too much under her lead, nearly exposing them to enemy fire. She caught the mistake in time, but the seed was planted. What if her family was right? What if her skill was not precision, but danger dressed in confidence? The squad noticed her unease. Hawk, her comms sergeant, asked one night, "Wheels, you good? You've been off your rhythm." She forced a nod, hiding the truth. Tank, the mechanic, studied her closely and muttered, "Trucks don't lie. They respond to nerves same as people." She ignored him, but his words stung. Sleep became fractured. In dreams, the sound of air brakes merged with Miguel's accusations, Maria's scorn, Earl's weary apology. More than once, she woke drenched in sweat, gripping her pendant as if it might anchor her back to steadiness. The pendant no longer swung with certainty. It hung heavy, as though doubting her too. She pushed on. Missions demanded her focus, soldiers still relied on her, but inside she carried a fracture she could not mend. She had been trained to survive ambushes, not the voice of her own family tearing down her worth. By the time her tour neared its end, Luna no longer sought letters from home. She stopped dialing the number altogether. What waited across the ocean was not welcome, but trial, not forgiveness, but accusation. And yet, she could not escape it. Orders came granting her emergency leave. Her father had suffered a massive heart attack. The news pulled her from the desert back toward Amarillo, back into the very storm she had tried to outrun. The soldier who had driven convoys through fire now prepared to walk into the ambush of her own blood. The call granting her emergency leave had carried a single line. Her father was in critical condition after a massive heart attack. The words followed her all the way from Afghanistan to Texas, pressing against her chest heavier than body armor. She had driven through ambushes and storms, but nothing prepared her for the ride back home. When Luna stepped off the plane in Amarillo, the air smelled of dust and oil, the scent of childhood. She expected silence, maybe hostility, but Miguel was waiting. He stood with his arms crossed, expression carved from stone. There was no embrace. "He's been asking for you," was all he said before leading her to the truck. The drive to the hospital was suffocating. Miguel spoke of the company's collapse, of debts piling up, of repossessed trucks hauled away one by one. His words were blunt, almost weaponized. "You think medals matter? They don't pay the bills. While you were out there playing convoy commander, Dad was drowning here." Luna stared out the window, knuckles white against her knees. She had no answer. The desert miles she carried inside her meant nothing on these Texas roads. In the ICU, machines breathed for her father. Earl's face was pale, lips dry, tubes feeding him air he could no longer take on his own. Luna reached for his hand, but her mother was there first, intercepting her with a glare sharp enough to cut steel. "Now you see what your selfishness has cost us," Maria said. "Happy now?" The family had gathered, filling the room with hushed whispers that turned to open blame. "If she'd stayed, Dad wouldn't have worked himself to death," a cousin murmured. Miguel didn't stop them. Luna stood tall, but inside she felt the storm return. She wanted to shout, to remind them that she had saved lives, that she had bled for something bigger. But the army had trained her to hold steady under fire, so she stayed silent, jaw locked, eyes only on her father. The irony struck her days later. For all the accusations of recklessness, the family needed her again. With drivers quitting and trucks repossessed, only a handful of contracts remained, dangerous loads, chemical hauls, icy runs. Miguel admitted it quietly one evening. "You're the only one who can handle them. Nobody else has the skill." It was a bitter twist. They had branded her dangerous, and now they depended on the very danger they despised. Still, she agreed, not for them but for Earl. Each morning she rose before dawn, checked on him in the hospital, then climbed into the cab of the remaining rigs. She carried medical supplies through ice storms, toxic waste through mountain passes, oversized equipment down narrow highways. Each delivery bought her father another day of care. Her military training surfaced in unexpected ways. She mapped routes with precision, logged every mile with detail, applied convoy discipline even when driving alone. At night, in the hospital waiting room, she sat with her boots still dusty, charting oxygen levels and blood pressure as if planning a mission brief. But gratitude never came. Maria dismissed her efforts. "You're not a nurse. Stop pretending you know what's best." Miguel accused her of stressing their father with her stories. The cousins looked away when she entered the room as though she carried contagion. Only Earl gave her solace. Though his body was failing, his eyes still searched for her, and when she leaned close, his hand squeezed faintly. In those small gestures, Luna read what words could not say. Yet the weight grew heavier. She carried convoys across lethal terrain overseas, and now she carried the resentment of kin who depended on her skill while despising her presence. Every insult layered over the old wounds, pressing her further into silence. She tapped her pendant at night in the hospital's dim light, the rhythm steady, as though reminding herself she was still a soldier, still the one who held the line. By the time winter crept in, the family's desperation deepened. Bills mounted, creditors circled, trucks disappeared from the yard. Miguel's face grew harsher with each passing day, his voice laced with panic. "We can't hold on much longer," he admitted one night, eyes darting toward their father's room. The ambush had begun, not with bullets or bombs, but with blame and dependency, twisted together. Luna had returned home to save her father, only to find herself trapped again in a war she could not win with medals or miles. And as her father's breathing grew weaker, the next battle revealed itself, waiting just ahead. It would not be fought on highways or deserts, but in the quiet rooms of their failing house, where every sacrifice she made was twisted into guilt. The storm of home had only begun, and the breathing machine roads were waiting. Home stopped feeling like home the day Earl returned from the hospital tethered to tubes and monitors. Machines now breathed for him, their steady hiss and mechanical rhythm echoing through the Rodriguez house like the idle of an engine that would never shut down. Luna became his shadow, his soldier, his nurse. At dawn, she checked his vitals, adjusted oxygen, cleaned the feeding tube. By daylight, she climbed into the cab of whatever truck hadn't been repossessed and drove loads others refused to touch. By night, she returned to the house to lift, feed, and comfort her father until exhaustion claimed her on the couch beside his bed. Her days bled together into a schedule harsher than deployment. 5:30, check oxygen. 6, truck start. 12 hours behind the wheel carrying dangerous cargo no one else dared haul. Chemical waste through mountain passes, oversized equipment down winding roads, medical supplies through ice storms. Then back to Amarillo, slipping out of the driver's seat and into the role of medic. Her uniform now was worn jeans streaked with grease, hands scarred from both engines and tubing. For all her sacrifice, the house remained hostile. Maria scoffed at her care. "You're not a nurse. Stop pretending you know what you're doing." Miguel, pacing the hallways with unpaid bills in hand, accused her of stressing their father. "He's worse because you fill his head with your army stories." The cousins averted their eyes, satisfied to let her shoulder the work but unwilling to admit her worth. Luna endured. She had faced ambushes and storms, but this was a war of attrition fought in silence. Her only ally was her father's eyes. He couldn't speak, but he had found a way to answer through blinks, once for yes, twice for no, 3 for I love you. She learned the code quickly, speaking to him in whispers while the machines kept time with their cold breathing. The roads she drove mirrored the war inside. On one haul through an icy mountain pass, her trailer began to jackknife, 80,000 pounds of chemical load sliding into chaos. The steering wheel fought her grip, tires screamed, and for a heartbeat the cliffside loomed. She forced herself to breathe, downshifted with surgical precision, and eased the truck back into line. When she delivered the $2 million load safely, the family called it luck. "Lucky she didn't kill someone," Miguel said, showing no gratitude. Luck had nothing to do with it. It was the same discipline that had carried convoys out of Hellmand. But here, every victory was twisted into another accusation. What Luna didn't know was that Miguel had begun collecting evidence. One night during a medical supply run, he filmed her truck racing down an icy road, editing out the emergency context. Later, when she forgot to change a filter on Earl's breathing machine until hours late, catching the error and fixing it herself, Miguel witnessed and recorded that too. Each moment framed not as sacrifice, but as recklessness. The weight of endless duty wore her thin. Burnout seeped into her bones. She lived on caffeine and stale sandwiches, muscles aching from lifting her father in and out of bed, nerves frayed from 12-hour drives through storms. Sometimes she caught herself staring too long at the road, mind blank, body moving only through habit. In those empty moments, the doubt whispered louder. Maybe they were right, maybe danger lived in her blood. Still, she endured. She marked every mile in her father's old logbook, the pages scented faintly of oil and dust. Her handwriting was steady, almost military in precision, as if keeping score against the silence around her. And when Earl blinked 3 times, "I love you," she tapped her pendant twice in reply, the only language they still shared. But cracks spread through even steel. One evening, after a storm run, she found Maria and Miguel whispering in the kitchen, their voices low but sharp. She caught fragments: proof, lawyer, inheritance. The words chilled her. For years she had carried the weight of their blame, but now it sounded like something more, an ambush not of words, but of strategy. In her father's room, the machines hissed, steady and unrelenting. She sat by his bed, holding his hand, whispering, "I'm still here, Dad, I won't abandon you." His fingers squeezed faintly in return. She wanted to believe that was enough. But the storm was gathering again, not on a battlefield, not on a mountain pass, but in the very house she had bled to keep standing. And when it struck, it would test not her driving, but her very right to belong. The last mile home was waiting. The machines that kept Earl alive grew weaker in their rhythm. Each hiss of the ventilator sounded like an engine struggling on its final drop of fuel. Luna could see it in his skin, in the slow fade of color from his face, in the way his fingers no longer gripped as tightly when she held his hand. She had driven through storms and gunfire, but nothing felt as helpless as watching her father's strength run out mile by mile. One night, the crisis struck. His heartbeat faltered, the monitors screaming in alarm. Nurses rushed in, but Luna was already moving, dropping to her knees beside the bed. Her training came back in a flash, compressions, breaths, steady rhythm. She fought for him the way she had fought for every soldier under her command. By the time the doctor arrived, she had pulled him back, his pulse faint but present. Without her, he would have been gone hours earlier. The doctor said it plainly, but Maria's voice cut across the truth. "What did you do to him? You're pushing him too hard." The cousins nodded in agreement, whispers of blame filling the sterile air. Luna stood silent, sweat still dripping from her forehead, her chest heaving from effort. Later, when the room quieted, she sat beside her father again. His eyes flickered open, weak but clear. They spoke in their code, 1 blink for yes, 2 for no, 3 for I love you. She leaned close, whispering questions. "Are you proud of me?" 1 blink. "Should I forgive them?" 2 blinks. "Do you love me?" 3 blinks. His hand squeezed hers with surprising strength, and then, as if the message had taken the last of his power, his eyes closed again. He never truly woke after that. The next morning, the ventilator hummed, but his chest barely rose. At 7:42 a.m., Earl Rodriguez's final mile ended. The family's response was swift and brutal. Maria stepped forward before Luna could speak, ordering the nurse, "Make sure she doesn't touch the arrangements. We'll handle everything properly." Miguel nodded in agreement, refusing even to meet his sister's eyes. The funeral planning went on without her. She was shut out of decisions, her voice erased as if she had not been the one who kept him alive for months. Still, she carried on with silent dignity, watching from the margins as they spoke of legacies and traditions that ignored the truth. When she tried to suggest a hymn her father loved, Maria cut her off with a glare. "We don't need your input." The words landed heavier than the folded flag of any soldier. But in the days that followed, she found what they could not erase. Inside her father's old truck, tucked beneath the seat, she discovered a shrine he had hidden away. Printouts of military blogs detailing her convoys, a framed photo of her receiving the Commendation Medal, letters drafted but never sent, addressed to defense contractors, asking about her record. At the center lay his logbook, pages worn, her name scribbled in margins alongside words of pride he never dared speak aloud. On one page, in his faded handwriting, she read, "My daughter drives with angels watching." The discovery struck her harder than any insult. For years, she had wondered whether her father truly believed in her or if his silence meant doubt. Now she knew the truth. His pride had been hidden, but it was real, stronger than the blame others cast upon her. Yet even in death, the ambush continued. Miguel scheduled the will reading and escrow meeting for the same day as the funeral, ensuring Luna would be caught off guard, raw with grief. The cousins muttered in corners, Maria's eyes sharp with cold calculation. The air carried not mourning but anticipation of division. Miguel whispered to one relative, "After today, she won't have a claim to anything." They smirked, already treating her like an intruder. Luna closed the truck's door slowly, pressing the logbook against her chest. She could smell the faint trace of old oil and paper, the scent of her father's life's work, mingling with her own memories of convoys and storm runs. She tapped her pendant, the rhythm steady again. Whatever waited in that law office, she would face it as she had always faced the road, steady hands on the wheel, eyes forward. The last mile home had ended, but a new road was opening. One not of grief alone, but of inheritance, betrayal, and confrontation. The Will Road trap was waiting. The funeral ended, but grief had no time to settle. Miguel wasted none of it. That very afternoon, he herded the family into the Sterling and Associates Law Office, a sterile building of glass and leather that smelled of polish and power. Luna followed last, still holding her father's logbook pressed against her chest. Her uniform was left behind. Here, it felt like armor would do no good. Inside, the air was cold, humming with the quiet menace of ceiling vents. Maria sat flanked by cousins. Miguel leaned forward at the head of the table as if already in command, and beside him waited a corporate representative from Auto Flow Logistics. An unfamiliar face, sharp suit, file folder thick as a weapon. Luna was given a chair at the far end, alone, as though the distance itself was part of the verdict. The notary opened the meeting. Earl's will was read aloud, each clause striking like a gavel. Miguel received 51% of the company, the house, and the land. Maria received 30% and retirement accounts. The cousins split the remainder. Then came Luna's portion, $1,000 and a conditional clause. The words carved into her like shrapnel. To Luna Rodriguez, $1,000 and potential future consideration if she completes anger management therapy and driving safety courses, proving she has overcome reckless tendencies that contributed to family business decline. The cousins smirked. Maria exhaled in satisfaction. Miguel leaned back, arms crossed as if the war was already won. But the ambush was not over. Miguel's attorney stood, clicking a remote. A projection screen lit up with images, shaky footage of Luna's truck barreling through an ice storm, cut to omit the emergency context, grainy clips of the tornado rescue crash, stripped of the life-saving prelude, military convoy recordings, spliced to make reversals look like reckless speeding. Even the night she replaced her father's breathing tube late, presented as evidence of negligence. The narration was merciless. A pattern of dangerous driving spanning 20 years, risk to family, community, and business. Every heroic act of her life reframed as recklessness. Her convoy victories turned into accusations. The room's silence pressed in, broken only by whispers among cousins, their satisfaction growing with every clip. The Auto Flow representative cleared his throat, finally speaking. As per the side agreement, our acquisition requires confirmation of family unity. The Rodriguez assets will transfer under the condition that all heirs support the terms. His tone was smooth, but Luna caught the flicker of unease in his eyes when the military footage played. He knew something was wrong. Miguel's phone buzzed under the table. He checked it twice, face tightening, but forced a smirk to mask it. Maria kept glancing at the corporate lawyer as though waiting for a nod of approval. Luna noticed every detail, every tremor. The army had taught her to observe patterns, and here the patterns smelled like sabotage. She stayed silent. Soldiers don't argue in the middle of an ambush. They wait, they assess, They gather intel. Her fingers tapped the logbook on her lap in the rhythm of discipline. The notary scribbled notes furiously, eyes narrowing when the edited footage cut too abruptly. Luna caught that too. There was a crack in their wall. Miguel leaned back toward her finally, a predator savoring his prey. "You see, sister, even here your record condemns you. You've always been dangerous. Dad knew it, now everyone does." She met his gaze, her face unreadable, the same mask she wore in convoys under fire. Inside, rage burned steady, but she forced herself still. Silence was her weapon now. The auto flow representative adjusted his tie, speaking again. "We will need unanimous acknowledgement before we finalize the purchase." His words carried hesitation. For a moment, the cousin's smirks faltered. Luna tucked the logbook closer to her chest. She thought of the hidden shrine her father had kept, the letters he had written, the proof that his silence had never been doubt. She remembered his last blinks. "Yes, no, I love you." Those truths were hers to wield. She would not fight here with shouts or fists. She would fight with evidence, with witnesses, with precision, just as she had driven through storms and ambushes before. The trap had been laid, but she was no stranger to ambush. And like every ambush she had ever survived, she knew the counterattack was already forming. She rose quietly when the meeting adjourned for recess. Hawk's voice rang in her memory, promising that the Convoy family never abandoned their own. Outside the glass walls, the sound of trucks braking on the street below hissed like old comrades waiting. The convoy was coming. Luna stepped out of the law office during recess, the weight of the ambush pressing against her chest. She had survived worse on roads littered with fire, but this was a different battlefield. Her own family had twisted every mile of her life into a weapon against her. Still, silence had always been her shield and patience her strongest ally. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She answered, half expecting another accusation. Instead, the familiar voice of Sergeant First Class Hawk Davidson came through the line, steady as ever. "Rodriguez, I've been tracking this. Your family's been selling assets to Auto Flow for months. This ain't inheritance. They're trying to cut you out. We're not letting that happen." Luna closed her eyes, listening to the sound of a friend's loyalty, something more solid than blood. Hawk's words steadied her like the rumble of an engine before a mission. "We're coming," he said. "You're not standing alone." When the meeting resumed at the funeral hall, where humiliation had first begun, the doors opened, and 4 figures in class uniforms marched in. Hawk Davidson, Specialist Kim Chen, Captain Sarah Martinez, and Master Sergeant James Tank Williams. They weren't family by blood, but by survival. The convoy had come home. Whispers rippled through the crowd of mourners still lingering after the service. The sight of soldiers in dress uniform drew every eye. Miguel's smirk faltered. Maria's face went pale. Even the Auto Flow representative straightened in his seat. Hawk spoke first, his voice filling the room. "We served with Staff Sergeant Rodriguez. We lived because of her, and we're here to make sure the truth is heard." He set a laptop on the table, projecting footage onto the same screen where Miguel's attorney had played doctored clips. This time, the raw files ran in full. The ice storm hall showed the truth. Hazardous conditions, flashing emergency lights, Luna's flawless downshift sequence as she delivered medical supplies. The tornado rescue footage, restored, revealed her dragging Maria from certain death before the truck flipped. The convoy reversal in Helmand played out in real time. 18 wheels rolling backward through fire, Luna's voice calm and sharp over the comms as 34 soldiers survived what should have been a massacre. The room fell silent except for the sound of Luna's commands echoing from the speakers. When the footage ended, Hawk turned to the notary. "That's not recklessness, that's precision." Chen stepped forward next, her voice unsteady but strong. "She saved me when shrapnel tore my side. We were under fire and she drove us out before I bled out. Reckless. No, she was the only reason I saw another sunrise. Captain Martinez followed, holding up official records. The Army does not hand out commendations to drivers who endanger lives. These medals, these citations, every line attests to exceptional skill and leadership. Finally, Tank spoke, grease still staining his hands. I kept every truck in her convoy running. 0 mechanical failures across 100,000 combat miles. That doesn't happen by luck. It happens because the driver respects her machine more than anyone else. Their testimonies landed like artillery. Each word stripped away the lies Miguel had built. The notary leaned forward, scribbling faster now, eyes narrowing at the discrepancy between edited lies and military records. Then Hawk pulled out the final piece, Earl's hidden shrine. Letters, printouts, his logbook marked with pride. The room stilled as Hawk read aloud Earl's handwriting. If my family paints my daughter as reckless, know this, she drives with precision I could never achieve. Trust her with your life. 34 soldiers already did. The auto flow representative rose slowly, adjusting his tie. Given this new evidence, auto flow is suspending all purchase agreements pending investigation. But we would like to speak with Staff Sergeant Rodriguez directly about potential partnership. His words shattered Miguel's composure. You can't do that, Miguel snapped. The deal's already in place. The representative's gaze was cold. The deal was contingent on family unity. What we've seen here suggests misrepresentation. Gasps broke through the hall. Maria looked stricken. Cousins exchanged nervous glances, and Miguel's phone buzzed again, but this time his hands trembled as he ignored it. The notary cleared his throat, voice firm. Based on the letter of instruction and evidence presented, the conditional clause is void. Assets will transfer according to original percentages. 40% belongs to Luna Rodriguez. For the first time since the funeral began, the room erupted not in blame but in applause. Community members, drivers, and even strangers who had come to pay respects now clapped, some standing in quiet salute. Outside, trucks in the lot released their air brakes in a hiss, like a convoy answering roll call. Luna sat motionless, her pendant warm against her skin, the rhythm steady. She had faced ambush and fire before, but this was different. Vindication, not survival. For once, the truth had rolled in like a convoy, unstoppable and undeniable. And as the crowd's applause filled the hall, Luna lifted her father's logbook onto the table. The battle for survival was over. The battle for legacy had just begun. The road forward was waiting. Applause still echoed in the auction hall when Luna stepped outside, logbook pressed to her chest. For the first time since her return to Amarillo, the weight on her shoulders felt lighter. The convoy had come back for her. The truth had pierced through years of lies, and her father's hidden words had spoken louder than Maria's scorn or Miguel's betrayal. But vindication was not the end. Roads never ended. They turned, they stretched, they demanded another mile. The notary's ruling restored her inheritance, but the greater prize was freedom. Otto Flo, now wary of the family conspiracy, sought her out privately. The representative approached her with a folder of proposals, offering millions in contracts and a position to lead their military transport division. Luna listened quietly, hands steady on the logbook. When he finished, she gave her answer in the calm tone of a soldier who had faced ambushes and storms. I won't lead for a corporation that profits off silence and manipulation, but I'll take the concept and make it ours. Rodriguez advanced logistics. Veteran drivers, precision training, human skill blended with smart technology. That's the future. The vision was born that night. No longer shackled by the family's narrative, Luna sketched the blueprint for a company that would outlast Auto Flow's ambitions. The Rodriguez home was converted into a headquarters and training ground. Earl's logbooks were placed in a glass case at the entrance, pages yellowed but proud, each mile inscribed with a history of grit. A small memorial wall was built beside them, with a single quote etched in brass. "She drives with angels watching." Within months, veterans filled the yard. Hawk became co-director of training, drilling recruits with the same precision Luna had enforced on convoys. Chen organized an emergency response unit, preparing teams for natural disasters. Martinez handled government contracts, securing steady work that gave veterans stability. Tank built the fleet from the ground up, maintaining engines as if they were living things. Together, they created a family that Luna had sought her whole life, not bound by blood, but by loyalty and survival. The company's reputation spread. When tornadoes tore through Oklahoma a year later, Rodriguez Advanced Logistics was the first to respond. Luna herself led the convoy through debris fields, headlights piercing smoke and dust. They carried medical supplies and relief cargo across 800 miles of danger, arriving hours ahead of schedule with not a single accident. Reporters asked how she managed such precision under pressure. She touched the pendant at her collar and answered, "My father taught me that wheels were in my blood. The Army taught me to use them with purpose. And my convoy showed me that driving isn't about speed. It's about bringing people home safely." Her words were broadcast across the state, resonating with veterans, truckers, and ordinary families who had once seen her as reckless. The name Luna Rodriguez no longer carried blame. It carried resilience. Miguel, beaten down by the collapse of his schemes, came to her one evening. His apology was fractured, halting. I was scared. Auto Flow threatened to blacklist us if I didn't fall in line. I thought I was protecting the family." His eyes pleaded for forgiveness. Luna listened, then answered with the cool finality of a commander. "You can work here if you want, but we're not family in this place. We're partners. That trust died with Dad." Miguel lowered his head, knowing it was more mercy than he deserved. Maria never came. She left Amarillo, bitter and silent, unable to face a daughter she could no longer control. For Luna, it was no loss. She had stopped chasing her mother's approval long ago. Instead, she poured her energy into building a legacy that honored her father's hidden pride. Veterans found purpose, convoys rolled out with precision, and the training center echoed with the sound of engines warming each dawn. The air carried not accusation, but belonging. At sunset 1 year later, Luna walked the grounds of the training yard. Rows of trucks stood ready, chrome glinting in fading light. Inside the classrooms, new recruits studied downshift patterns and convoy tactics. On the wall of the memorial, Earl's photo smiled down on them all. Luna carried the logbook in her hand, flipping to a page filled with his tight scrawl. She placed it back into the case, tapped her pendant twice, and stepped outside to hear the engines start. The roar was steady, unified, a rhythm that had carried her from reckless child to soldier, from exile to leader. The longest road had brought her here, to a place where home was no longer defined by those who cursed her, but by those who trusted her with their lives. And as the night shift convoy rolled into the horizon, Luna whispered to herself, "Some roads take you away. Others bring you back to who you were meant to be." Thank you for walking this road with Luna. If her journey moved you, share your thoughts, leave a comment, and join again for more stories of resilience and redemption. Your support keeps these roads alive. Stay safe, stay strong, and may your miles always bring you home.